What up, 8th grade? Back here with section 4. I figured I'd try out this new introduction again. Let me know in class if you like this. Personally, I'm kind of partial to hey, 8th grade, but whatever gets you all to pay attention. So in section 4, we're going to be talking about making equations from relations. In section 2, we talked about what a relation is, defining a function, looking at XY charts and mappings and things like that. Here in section 4, we're going to be writing equations and finding those things that made the relations. Okay. Later on this year, we're going to talk a lot more about writing equations from functions. But right now, we're just kind of introducing it a little bit and learning how to write it from an XY chart. Okay. If you remember back to last year when we talked about graphing, there was a specific way that equations were made. Okay. You'll notice the ink color changed. I figured out a much better way to write with this new Smart Ink software. So you'll enjoy this. I can change the color around now to help us out. So our equations, they always come in the form y equals mx plus b. Okay, that's called the slope-intercept form. If you remember it, great. If you don't, we're going to be talking about it heavily in the future. But the slope-intercept form, we have m as our slope. We have b as our y-intercept. Okay, and again, if you remember it, awesome. If not, it's all right. You can still get through here, and we'll come back to it later in the year. So all of our answers are going to look like this: y equals mx plus b. Okay? Let's get started. We have two examples. These take a while to do. They're long problems, so let's go through this. The first thing we need to do, step 1, is to write the relation in a table. You can see that's already been done for us. So we're on to step 2. Compare the difference between x values and the difference between y values. So what I'm doing here is looking at how the x changes as I move down the table. And as I'm going down there, you see that x changes by 1 every time. So delta x is 1. Okay. Another thing you might remember or might have forgotten is that delta means the change in. So I'm looking at how a bunch of numbers change, how x changes. It's changing by 1 each time. Then if I go and look at y is changing by 2 each time, going up 2. So delta y is 2. All right? That's all step 2 is, looking at how the x and y changes. Step 3, determine m, determine our slope. Okay? You might remember that slope is determined by the change in x, delta x. Sorry, that was wrong, my mistake. It's determined by the change in y, delta y, over delta x. Okay. So we already know what delta y is. Delta y is 2. Delta x is 1. So what's that mean our slope is? M is equal to 2. Okay? Now on to step 4. Before we get into step 4, this is where it gets a little bit tricky. Let's take a look back at our equation. We have y equals mx plus b. The only thing we're plugging in for is m and b. The y and the x stay just as they are. We don't plug numbers in for y and x for our final answer. So we found half of it. We found our m. So now we need to work on finding our b. Okay? So at this point in the process, the equation that we have is y equals 2x plus b. Okay? Now what we need to do for step 4 is to go back to the xy chart, but we're going to add a column in here, right in the middle. I call it the xm term because it's using the slope and our x, 2x. And what we're going to do is figure out what 2x is. Just like a normal xy chart. If x is 1, I take that, plug it in, and I get 2. If x is 2, I plug it in and get 4. 2 times 2 is 4. Plug in 3 to get 6, plug in 4 to get 8, and 5 to get 10. All I was doing was plugging those x values in right here for 2x. Okay? That's step 4. Step 5 is to compare my xm term column to the y term column. All right? So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to take 2 to 5. What did I do to go from 2 to 5? Well, I added 3. What did I go from 4 to 7? I added 3. To go from 6 to 9, I added 3. To go from 8 to 11, add 3. 10 to 13, add 3. If they all work out the same, we know we have this right. That means our b is equal to 3. So we can put it all together and say that our final answer is y equals 2x plus 3. Okay, that's the equation that gave us the xy chart. All right? All right, let's flip it over. We have another example on the back. Step 1, we need to write a relation in a table. This time they didn't give it to us in a table, so we need to do that. All right, so let's fill it in. We know that our x's, we have a 3, -1, we have a 5, -7, a 7, -13, a 9, -19, and 11, -25. Okay, there's our table, XY chart. Step 2, a little too far. Compare the difference between the x values and the difference between y values. So let's go back. Take a look at my x values. What's it doing each time? It's going up 2, so my x is 2. My y values, on the other hand, are going down 6. So my y is -6. Okay? From there, we created our slope. Remember, slope is equal to delta y over delta x. All right. Delta y is -6. Delta x is 2. What's that give me? A slope of -3. Okay. So step 4 is to add that to the xm column. But before we get there, let's take a little break at the halfway point and see what our equation looks like. You should have this. Our slope is -3, so right now we have the equation y equals -3x plus b. All right? So step 4 is to add this to the xm table. So let's fill this in. Our x column and our y column went 3, 5, 7, 9, 11. And this went -1, -7, -13, -19, and -25. Okay. What did we add here in the xm column? We're taking our -3x, whatever's there, plugging it in. Okay. So 3 times -3 is -9. 5 times -3 is -15. 7 times -3 is -21. 9 times -3 is negative what? -27. And 11 times -3 is -33. Our last step is to go through and compare my XM column to my Y column. This is what's going to find my B. So from -9 to 1, or -1, it went up 8. -15 to -7, it went up 8. It's important that you check each one, because if it doesn't work for each example, then it's not correct. You can't just check the first one and say, oh, it worked. You might have made a mistake somewhere else. So it has to work for each single item here. And since it went up 8 each time, our B is +8, which means that my final equation is y equals -3x plus 8. All right. That's it for section 4. It's a very, very long process, so make sure you practice this extensively. Ask a lot of questions. That's what I'm here for in class, is if you're practicing this stuff in class, you should be asking questions. All right? So we'll see you then. Bye.